The splintering of the wood surprised me out of my morning cup. I came out and found a cloud of dust, a wrecking bull excavator, and three condescending HOA board members slouching in folding chairs, looking as if they were front row at a parade. My dam is gone, reduced to ground. Karen, their queen bee, even had on a sash that said, "Water belongs to the HOA." I stood there, in my bare feet and flannel pajama pants, blinking at the metal claw that had just annihilated the one thing that was keeping them all safe from the wrath of nature. Yeah, that's me. And if you're curious about how I got here, just wait because this story, it's only just beginning. They tell you that you never quite know your neighbors until you construct something they can't comprehend. In my case, it was the summer I finished my dam. Don't picture some great concrete wall. It was a precisely engineered earth and stone dam, complete with a hand-operated sluice gate that I installed myself in 3 years. Each piece of wood, each sandbag, each purposefully placed stone, constructed through experience, all-night research, and the counsel of my deceased uncle, a retired Army Corps engineer. Why bother? Because my property tops the ridge overlooking Oak Hollow Estates, a labyrinth of beige vinyl homes, mulch-controlled flower beds, and a homeowners association fixated on appearances. What they did not realize was that their subdivision was constructed right in the middle of a natural floodplain, one that would overflow like clockwork every so often, until I purchased the property and designed a system to divert runoff safely. My dam was the coup de grace. It functioned flawlessly, stealthily, invisibly. No one even knew it was there for 2 years. But then meet Karen. She relocated, became HOA president, and suddenly found herself noticing her mulch wasn't floating down the creek every April. The creek behind her house, which had once been a raging torrent, was now a gentle trickle. She could smell change, but she couldn't grasp it, and that made it deadly. To understand the first indicator of trouble, she appeared suddenly at my borderline white jeans, scuffed espadrilles, and a face that suggested lemon juice had passed her lips. "I came to talk to you about the building," she stated, motioning vaguely towards the dam, which, remember, was completely out of view from where she stood. "It's out of character for the neighborhood." I calmly informed them that my land did not belong in their neighborhood. I wasn't under HOA rule. I had permits from the county, the water district, and the soil drainage agency. Several agencies, signed, sealed, and in compliance. Her eyes narrowed further. "If there is no water there, what are you trying to keep out? You constructed something that isn't necessary. That makes it suspicious." Hook alert. And that single word suspicious would come unstitched. The next few weeks were filled with 17 HOA violation notices. 17. Ridiculous infractions such as unapproved earthwork, unauthorized water storage, and visual impact on neighborhood harmony. Remember, I'm not a dues-paying member, but they did fine me anyway. $300 for causing hydrological disarray. I put that one in a frame. And then there were the threats. Letters of threatening to report me to code enforcement, the EPA, even FEMA. I wrote certified letters, red ink notes, and every legal document in my possession. That is when the propaganda started. Flyers somehow ended up in all of the mailboxes in Oak Hollow, advising of a shadow reservoir on private property, an unauthorized body of water with unknown dangers. They sounded like I was constructing a covert dam to bring biblical floods along Main Street. I could have sued, but I didn't. I observed instead, installed trail cams, maintained logs, welded the dam gate closed with a steel chain. Then I took off out of town for a Saturday wedding in Montana, 48 hours. Before I headed out, I checked everything. Spillways, retaining walls, drainage pipes. I even posted a clear notice. Private property, do not trespass. Structure under video surveillance. When I came back, something wasn't right. You know that creepy sensation when you open the refrigerator and you know something's wrong, but can't identify the smell? That's what it was hiking the ridge. The silence was loud. Crunching beneath my boots, the gravel reached the hilltop. And then I saw it. Hook alert. You can prepare for sabotage, but you're never ready to see your work erased. Just a memory now. My dam destroyed, bulldozed, as if it never had been. Just a scar in the earth, a pile of broken stones. There stood a single piece of the sluice gate, crooked in the mud like a tombstone. Bare tire tracks ran back into Oak Hollow. excavator tire tracks. I waited there for 5 agonizing minutes, sucking in the dust of what once protected them and wondering what happened next. My mouth was parched, my ears were ringing, and then I spotted it, a laminated notice, waving in the wind like a sale flag at a garage sale. Removal of unauthorized structure pursuant to Section 8.3 of the Oak Hollow Estates Covenant. No date, no signatures, only the HOA letterhead and a neat little list of board-approved actions. My face grew hot. I wanted to yell, to rip that sign in two, but instead, I spun and strode towards my trail cams. Gone. First one torn right off the tree, the bracket dangling like a broken wrist. Second, same thing. Third, bashed with a rock. But I'd prepared for this. Redundant micro-recorders had been concealed within the dam's control box, and what they recorded sent shivers down my spine. The video caught two men wearing orange vests, no corporate logos, no IDs visible, sawing through the welded chain using bolt cutters. A minute or so later, a rented Bobcat truck appeared in the frame, crashing into the foundation of my dam like a battering ram. And there, hovering just off to one side, was Karen, HOA badge prominently pinned to her raincoat, drinking iced coffee, giving orders, clear everything. This site is a blight, she told him. If he was going to construct a reservoir, he ought to have asked us permission first. Hook alert. Ask them, on my property, with my permits, for a project they never even grasped? To Karen, this was not a precaution. It was not civil engineering. It was a marauding garden gnome on her immaculately set lawn, and she annihilated it with the tenderness of someone reorganizing deck chairs. I burned the video onto a flash drive, copied my whole packet of permits, and drove directly to the county offices. I spent the next few days filing all sorts of reports: environmental infractions, trespassing, property damage. I talked to my water engineer, spent money on a new site survey. When the restoration quotes arrived, they were over $42,000, and that didn't even start to address the environmental harm or potential downstream liability. Because here's what they still didn't get. That dam was not a pond. It was a buffer, a breakwater against them and disaster. It was keeping back more than 170,000 gallons of stormwater that now had nothing to impede it, as it would just speed its way into a neighborhood constructed on clay-rich soil with 1980s French drains and no actual retention system. And monsoon season was 2 weeks off. It began, as these storms always do, with a gentle tapping on the window like an old friend saying hello. But I'd seen the satellite models. NOAA data showed a freak weather pattern, a warm Gulf front meeting a stalled cold system over the valley. The kind of storm you see once a decade, and this time, there was no dam to take the hit. My fingers drummed against the table as the rain intensified, each drop on the tin awning outside cracking like static. It had been 6 days since I'd found the dam destroyed. Despite the police reports, despite the evidence, nothing had happened. No fines, no charges, not even a warning. The county engineer's office offered me a half-hearted apology and a referral to small claims court. In the meantime, the HOA had gone dark. No response, no responsibility, just silence behind their new power washing and pretended grins. By the third morning of rain, the ground was swollen and heavy. My gravel path had dissolved into mush. I trudged the ridge each morning, my boots sinking into what had once been firm ground. Water accumulated in areas it never used to, pouring into the vacant spaces left where the demolition stood. I'd rushed to create temporary berms, but they weren't designed for this much weight. In the absence of the dam, the hillside was a waterslide, each drop hurtling directly toward Oak Hollow Estates. Hook alert. You don't realize you missed the dam until it's destroyed, and then you hope it returns before the storm does. On the fourth night, at precisely 2:37 a.m., it occurred. A crashing, booming boom rent the stillness like a redwood splitting along its axis. I was shaken awake, heart racing, and dashed to the window. Even through the drumming rain, I could hear it, the low, ravenous growl of moving water. I kicked on my boots, grabbed a flashlight, and burst into the night. From the ridge, I could see it, no trickle, no gentle flow. A full-fledged wall of brown, roiling liquid tearing downhill like a runaway freight train. It slammed through the top edge of Oak Hollow with monstrous force, and there it was, the wall at the back of Karen's cul-de-sac, a symbol of suburban arrogance, sheared off just below the ground level. The 30-foot slab of imitation stone had been splintered halfway down the slope, like a broken vase dropped on the floor. Her immaculately landscaped garden, formerly the pride of the HOA, was a quagmire. Patio furniture floated in the slush like abandoned toys in a sand-sunken sandbox. But the street outside? That was even worse. Water poured through the road, engulfing mulch, trash cans, and God knows what else. Floodlights came on individually as neighbors ventured out of doors, squinting into the approaching whirlwind, unready and disoriented. All they had disdained, derided, or attempted to demolish was rushing towards them. Driveways disappeared under pools of standing water. Vehicles were half submerged, side mirrors barely breaking the surface. I saw a garden gnome, a smug little one with a fishing rod, get blasted like a missile right through someone's bay window. It would have been funny if it hadn't resembled something biblical. I dashed back in and fetched my camera. If they wanted proof, I'd provide them with a documentary. I shot it all. The breach, the torrents, sidewalks curving under the pressure, drainage grates blasting off like geysers. At one point, I managed to get a for sale sign floating down the street like it was tubing down a lazy river. By sunrise, Oak Hollow resembled a war zone. Emergency crews and fire trucks had just arrived as the clouds started to clear. A golden sunbeam broke through the destruction, illuminating the wreckage like a suburban dramatic set. And there, in the center of it all, was Karen surrounded by a pink bathrobe, streaks of mascara running, screaming into her phone as firefighters pushed through her front yard with a rubber raft. Her hydrangeas were submerged, her mailbox missing. And when our eyes met over the flooded expanse, they didn't say sorry. They said, "Oh God, we picked the wrong guy." I waved at her. Later that day, as the HOA board members met within the community center, trying to determine whom to blame and how to spin it, something more wonderful happened. The county emergency manager appeared, clipboard under her arm, rain-soaked yellow boots, the type of woman who appeared more at ease in FEMA meetings than homeowner brunches. She traversed the boundary with a subdued, practiced ease, and then she trudged directly up the slope and knocked on my door. "Mr. Allen," she said, flicking water off her glasses. "You own parcel 83B, right?" I nodded warily. "You had a private retention structure on this slope." "I did," I replied. I let her in and showed her everything: the before shots, the permits, the engineered blueprints, the drone footage, the timestamps, and of course, the video of the HOA taking it all down without so much as a call. She didn't say much, just scribbled in her notebook. A lot. Then she shut it slowly. "This runoff event caused a reclassification of the floodplain," she explained. "That translates to insurance rates, infrastructure upgrades, and remediation. $1 million money, $1 million liability." I cocked my head. "You think the HOA's responsible?" She glanced up. "Oh, they're already suing you." I blinked. "Me, yep," she replied matter-of-factly. "Filled out a preliminary complaint this morning. Accused you of taking down a key stormwater barrier without board approval, resulting in cataclysmic damage." I laughed so hard I almost spilled my coffee. "That was my dam, on my land, built with my permits." "I know," she said, turning another page, "which is why this just got very interesting, all in a span of 24 hours. The HOA issued an email blast with me accused of unauthorized landform modification. Karen did a next-door rant that read like a gibbering madwoman, littered with typos, wherein she called me a wild hydrologist wannabe. My name trended on community Facebook. Residents began referring to me as Damn Man, basically. Soggy Batman or something. Here's the one they didn't plan out, though. By blaming me, they had inadvertently confessed something very important, that the lack of the dam caused the flood. That implied that the dam was needed, and if it was needed, then demolishing it without process, notice, or legal justification wasn't petty. It was willful negligence. Their own story had just become my Exhibit AI. Put it all up in the cloud and mailed hard copies to my attorney. She was already working on the countersuit. Meanwhile, the residents of Oak Hollow were waking up. Once word got out that the HOA had ordered the demolition, things got ugly. At a town hall meeting, a mortgage broker named Vince stood up and demanded to know who approved the bulldozing. Karen tried to deflect, but it was like watching someone try to stop a landslide with a salad fork. The storm had passed, but the reckoning had just begun. 9 days later, it arrived. A certified letter, hand-delivered, tucked into a crisp folder with gold embossed lettering, like it was a wedding invitation rather than a declaration of war. The Oak Hollow Estates Homeowners Association, by and through counsel, hereby sues gross negligence, willful property damage, reckless terrain modification. I stood on the floor of my kitchen, holding it in my hands for the third time, as rain streamed from the eaves like a curtain from the underworld. They were accusing me. Me, the one guy who worked for 3 years planning a solution to their dilemma, who had approvals, facts, drawings, who constructed a dam to save them from exactly this. The one they paid no attention to, the one they ridiculed, the only person who knew about the flood coming. And when the jury gets to see what I do have, they're going to wish that damn dam was the only thing that ruptured. Allegedly, as their small legal fantasy book told it, I'd abandoned my holding structure, left it to disintegrate, and then actively dismantled it without so much as an email warning the county, leading to uncontrolled watershed release. They even used satellite photographs, taken once they'd bulldozed the dam, as evidence of my non-adherence. It would have been amusing, if only it wasn't so deliberately engineered. I called Sarah my lawyer, the same woman who assisted me in filing the initial dam permits. She laughed so hard I feared she was going to choke on her coffee. "They're suing you," she said. "This is a gift. I haven't seen malpractice this brazen since a zoning board constructed a dog park on top of a buried septic tank." I saw her the following morning. We spread it all out on her huge oak conference table like a crime scene. The permit, 3 agencies' stamps, engineering drawings signed by a professional hydrologist, topo surveys with elevation overlays, dozens of photographs, before, after, aerial footage. Trail cam shots, time-stamped video of the HOA contractors clipping the chain on the access gate, and the crowning glory thermal drone photography from 3 weeks prior to demolition, revealing active water retention and runoff stabilization. Sarah gazed at that one as if it were a lost Da Vinci. "We're not merely going to contest this," she declared, eyes shining. "We're going to bury them in it." So we brought a counterclaim, formally a cross-complaint. We charged illegal demolition of an approved structure, trespassing destruction of private infrastructure, violation of local floodplain management laws, and most importantly, tampering with an engineered water control system during an active hydrological risk period. We subpoenaed the crew who'd actually done the demolition. Turns out they were a landscaping crew hired off Craigslist. Paid in cash, no insurance, no licensing, no clue. One of them testified under oath. I said, "Shouldn't we get the homeowner's permission first?" And she, Karen, said, "He doesn't live here. He'll thank us later." The court date was scheduled 3 weeks hence, and to their credit, the HOA doubled down. Karen convened an emergency meeting at the community center, where she informed residents that I was attempting to extort the neighborhood with bogus science and revenge lawsuits. She explained I destroyed the dam myself to spite them, but the tide was already shifting. Insurance adjusters were flying overhead like vultures. 6 homes were ruled temporarily uninhabitable. Mold was thriving in the drywall. A family was living out of a motel. Premiums were going through the roof. People were angry. Then came the shocker. The County Flood Control Board issued its formal report of an independent study. The words were dry, bureaucratic, but ruinous. The removal of the private retention structure materially contributed to the severity of the flooding experienced by residents in the Oak Hollow Estates development. Translation: the dam made a difference, and I didn't take it out. That report did more than just support my counterclaim. It opened the floodgates wide, because now Karen and the board were not just facing me, they were facing possible criminal liability. They had taken out a registered stormwater control system with no legal right, no notice to the county, and no review by an engineer. That's not just abuse of power, that's reckless endangerment. By the time we went into court, it wasn't a trial, it was a funeral. The HOA attorney attempted to portray me as a wayward landowner with a God complex, said I constructed the dam to feed my ego, that I destroyed it in a fit of spite amidst the most hydrologically unstable month of the year. Sarah didn't even blink. She lined up the drone footage on a projector. The dam standing, then vanished. Then a pan over the muddy wreckage in Karen's yard. where a hydrangea bush bobbed like an abandoned life raft. Then she distributed laminated copies of the permits, dated, highlighted, signed, ironclad, and then she pulled the ace, a copy of the HOA meeting minutes, the one where they talked about removing the damn issue while he's gone. The judge read it out. The courtroom fell silent so dramatically you could hear someone's soda fizzing back in the back row. Karen shifted like she was on a waffle iron, and then we brought in the bulldozer guy. Sarah questioned, "Did you have the landowner's permission?" "No." "Did you have any permits from the county?" "No." "Did you inform anyone at the HOA that this could be illegal?" He nodded. "Yeah," I told the blonde lady. She said, "This whole neighborhood's on our side. He's just some loner with a hill and a grudge." The jury did not appear confused. They appeared outraged. The verdict came down 2 weeks later. The judge threw out the HOA's lawsuit in its entirety for lack of merit, malicious purpose. And his words, not mine, gross procedural misconduct. Then there was the decision on the countersuit. They were held liable on 4 counts: illegal demolition, damage to property environmental code infractions, and negligent contribution to municipal flooding. The damages $1,870 for loss of structure, $620 for environmental cleanup, $130 for attorney fees, and $50,000 in punitive damages for good measure. I walked out of that courthouse with a check for more than I'd spent building the dam. But money wasn't the win. The win was what came next. Karen was removed as HOA president within a week. A petition circulated calling for the entire board to resign. 3 stepped down. 1 moved out of state. The HOA held a vote to establish a new oversight committee, one that would actually require community input for major decisions. And best of all, my land was redefined by the county as an environmental buffer zone. Untouchable. Outside HOA jurisdiction, no more laminated threats, no more clipboard crusaders, just peace, gravity, and water where it belonged. I never figured the end of a war could be so subdued. No gavel slam, no cheers, just the soft churn of backfilled dirt and the rhythmic thump of shovels as my neighbors worked with me to rebuild what ignorance had tried to destroy. My dam, the same that they used to refer to as a threat to community beauty. It went up again, stone by stone, beneath a sky no longer menacing. But this time, it wasn't me alone. It was Vince from Lot 9 who used to gaze past me at the feed store. It was Martha who had her herb garden washed away by the flood. It was even the Martinez twins whose basement still smelled of bleach and mildew handing me rebar like penance. No word was said of the trial, not allowed, but the pressure of what had occurred still clung around. You could feel it in the way people moved, in the stillness of reverence for water and land, and, inexplicably, for me, odd how reputations change. You're the angry hillman with a doomsday bunker for a month. The next month, you're the fellow who saved our foundations. Time and floodwater tend to wash clean. And just as I'd assumed it was finished, the county brought down the final gavel. They reported the HOA to the state attorney general's office. What happened? Audits, subpoenas, interviews. It turns out Karen had been paying landscaping contracts to her nephew at triple market rates. The flood-friendly mulch program, a racket. The emergency retention fund, spent on catered lunches and educational retreats. The receipts did not lie, and neither did the PayPal paper trail straight to Karen's account, described as HOA executive consulting fees. At month's end, the HOA was dismantled, declared administratively negligent, functionally compromised. Dead. No more dues. No more mailboxes painted regulation beige. No more fines for planting the wrong flowers. The bylaws that formerly governed with an iron fist now rested in a soggy heap of revoked charters and unpaid legal fees. And those fees, they didn't vanish when the HOA did. The court held that Karen, Richard, and 2 other board members were personally responsible for the damages, not covered by insurance. $2,110 in restitution. Karen appealed twice. She lost twice. By the time she was done, she'd mortgaged her house, depleted her savings, even sold her BMW, and it still wasn't sufficient. For a month later, a for sale sign appeared on her front lawn, not the tasteful variety, One of those gaudy orange motivated seller, as is signs that yell desperation louder than a smoke detector. Rumor had it she took a job in a suburb just outside Tulsa, moderating a Facebook group concerning HOA free living and grumbling about squirrels. And me, I rebuilt, not merely the dam, but the trust. I invited a cookout the first dry weekend after we installed the final retaining wall. Folks came with casseroles, coolers, and whispered apologies. We sat on collapsible chairs along the ridge, gazing out over the valley. Nobody mentioned the trial, but the air felt lighter. The land was still mending. So were we. It's peaceful now. Quiet. You can still see faint outlines of where the flood cut its path through the streets, patches of new concrete, mismatched siding, grass growing back in strange little whirls. But nature heals. So do people, if you give them a reason to. A few days later, I put up the new sign, bolted it into a thick post next to the spillway, where runoff now trickles calmly into the downstream culvert. Simple aluminum plaque, weatherproofed black letters on a silver background. It read, "Next time, ask the guy who understands gravity." Below that, in smaller font, drainage capacity, county permit number. No ego, just fact. The flood made believers out of all of them. Even the HOA diehards who never once admitted they were wrong started walking their dogs past the dam with subtle nods and tighter leashes. One of them even left me a note. No name. Just, "You were right, we're sorry." Now, whenever the clouds converge and storms are forecast, I sleep well. Not because I have faith in the weather, but because I have faith in what I constructed and who constructed it with me. There is a poetry in that. This small piece of land, formerly a battlefield of meanness and formality, now takes easy breaths once more. The creek runs, the soil sustains, the frogs have returned, and the children too, splashing in the shallow water as if nothing ever transpired. But they do not forget, not out of fear, not in wrath, just that quiet manner that children have by observing, by seeing, and perhaps one day by creating something of their own which holds fast when the waters mount.